is the United States dollar under threat? Well, the U.S. dollar became the backbone of the global economy after World War II because of America's robust economy, its democracy, and its transparent regulatory systems, which made the nation seem like a safe place for international investors. But now the BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, have announced plans to develop a new currency. Their goal is to reduce reliance on the U.S. dollar and other Western currencies as well, and protect themselves from international pressure. In fact, Brazil and China have already struck a deal to bypass the dollar when paying for trade goods, which is a major milestone in Beijing's long-term plans to establish its own currency, the yuan, as the dominant international currency. So, what will this new currency look like, and what will it mean for the dollar? Well, joining us now is Professor John Quelch from the Miami Herbert Business School at the University of Miami. So the BRICS nations aren't a formal trade bloc. So if they do, in fact, create this new currency, how will it ultimately be used?
So I think what we'd find is that it would initially be used in very large transactions that are government-style transactions between two or more of the countries involved. You know, just to give a little bit of background here, it is the case that the U.S. dollar has a role that is outsized relative to the 24% of world GDP that the U.S. commands. So the U.S. dollar is involved in almost 90% of all international trade settlements, and around about 60% of foreign currency reserves around the world held by central banks are held in U.S. dollars. So the BRICS nations combined, their GDP is around about 25% of world GDP, vis-a-vis the US now at 24%. And so it's not surprising that these nations collectively are saying, hey, wait a minute, why should our macroeconomic policies and exchange rates be at the mercy of US dollar Federal Reserve decision-making?
So break down what this would mean. If this currency does come to fruition, how is it going to impact the strength of the U.S. dollar, and what does it mean for the average person out there?
Well, a good analogy, Natasha, would be the euro, which, of course, has now been around for 3+ decades. And when the euro came in, it was, not regarded as that strong an opponent to the dollar. But the fact is that the European nations have, of course, used the euro to facilitate all of their intra-European trade, and some trade beyond that as well is now carried out in euros. So what I think you would see here, if there is such a BRICS-type association, which I think, by the way, would be very difficult to pull off because there is no trade bloc, as you said, that involves these 5 nations. But if there were such a currency, as I said, it would primarily be used initially for trade among the 5 nations, before then being potentially expanded out to other nations. The Chinese have, of course, long aspired to develop a digital yuan as an alternative trading currency. They haven't made a tremendous amount of progress, and so I think this partnership is reflective of that, and the Chinese are trying to use the BRICS association as a way to further push the yuan, though they're saying it doesn't matter if it's a digital rupee, a digital yuan, a digital ruble, but in actuality, I think we all know that it would likely be a digital yuan, or at least be heavily based on a digital yuan if it were to come into existence.
We do know that obviously the BRICS nations and China are not the only nations to explore using alternatives to the U.S. dollar. What other nations are considering doing the same? And could we see other countries around the world joining the BRICS nations?
It's possible, but I think they have to prove themselves first before others are going to line up. I mean, when you're thinking about international trade settlements, this is not something that you want to waste too much time worrying about. And so it's very convenient for every nation to use the US dollar as its settlement mechanism. However, as I said earlier, the substantial increase in U.S. interest rates in the last 6 months has really brought home to emerging economies in particular that have dollar-denominated debt that there's a significant risk in being overly dependent on the U.S. dollar for their reserves, for their trade settlements. And so that's the basis on which we're seeing this BRICS concept emerge right now. That's why we're seeing it today.